good morning, everybody. Just wanted to give everybody a nice welcome this morning to the webinar that we're doing with Sean Beck. So I am Mark Kent from the One Group, just want to give everybody a little bit of an introduction as to why we're doing this, hopefully what we're trying to get out of it as well. So we are a specialist recruitment organisation, for those of you that don't know us, and believe it or not, there still is recruitment happening out there even at this time. It is a complete fraction of what it has been used to, of course, but certainly some opportunities still going on in certain sectors. But today is not about us and pitching, it's more about you getting some value from the content that we're putting together. So we've had a series of these webinars now, which have been really well subscribed. So I just wanted to thank certainly Sean and everybody else that's put together some content for us here, which has been really valuable. And certainly the feedback to now has been excellent. So this is the 6th we've done in the series. And now this is going to talk about emotional intelligence and the importance of, and I mean, this is an important topic at the best of times, let alone when we're sat in different rooms, different houses, and our office locations have completely changed and our teams are completely remote. So this will be a good opportunity for us all just to get a bit more insight about what we can do. And certainly what we're hoping from this series of webinars is give us some tips and tricks in the marketplace that we can be more efficient and more effective with our teams and managing those. So, and also ourselves, understanding ourselves that little bit better. So what we'll do in terms of format, just to give everybody a bit of an idea, the room's filling up nicely, by the way. We've got over 50 people in already. I think we had about 100 subscribed, and we'll kick off in a second. So we have a chat function. So for those of you that don't know the software very well, if you have a look at the bottom, I think you should have a toolbar depending on how you've got it set up, but there is a chat box and there is a Q&A box. So with the chat function, this gives Sean a good opportunity to try and react to things as and when they come up. So if there's anything particularly pertinent that you want to get answered or something relevant to one of the slides, Sean will do his best here to kind of interact with everybody. And then there is a Q&A. So there's a Q&A box. So for those of you that want to put a question, a structured question together, what we will do is we can't promise that the webinar itself will get an answer to your question, but what we can do is we'll make sure that we do come back to you, and you make sure that we have some contact with you afterwards, and we'll make sure every question is answered in one form or another. So just looking down, we've got another good amount of people. So I will now hand you over to Sean and come back at the end of this. I'm really looking forward to the content. So to introduce you to Sean, so those of you who don't know Sean, Sean has partnered with us now for probably a good couple of years now, and really helped out putting together some great content around leadership techniques, management techniques and styles, some really good stuff. And hopefully this is going to be as good as everything else that we've seen from Sean, and I'm sure it will be. I've had a look at the content, I'm looking forward to it. So Sean, I'll leave it over to you and I'll let you give the guys a bit more of an introduction on your good self. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, great to. I was going to say great to see everyone, but I can't actually see everyone. All I can see is the PowerPoint slide deck. But I can see you all out in the ether there. So thanks for joining me, and thanks for joining the One Group guys, who Mark says we've been working together now. And this is our I believe our 5th topic. So this is our 2nd webinar, and we've done some face-to-face events as well. But for those of you that haven't met me before or haven't come across me before, I'm Sean, around about 16, 17, 18 years in the world of talent, learning and development, real mix of organisations, the Environment Agency, Hotel Chocolat, Ted Baker, in the corporate world. But for the last 4 years, I've been at the helm of Inspire Ignite, working with individuals on a one-to-one coaching perspective, and also working with teams and wider businesses to help them to develop their people, keep their people engaged, and help them to support the leadership and management development within their businesses. So, as Mark said, we're talking about the power of emotional intelligence, and as he's very kindly steered us towards, I've got the chat window open on my screen. So if you want to kind of contribute anything, or you want to throw anything into that window, then feel free. I'll keep a little eye on that to the top right. If I open the Q&A screen as well, it obscures most of my screen. So I'm going to keep that closed, but I will commit to kind of just checking in on that one as we go through. So as Mark said, if there's any burning questions or burning things that we can touch on and we can throw into the webinar because it feels relevant, we can do that. If not, happy to pick up afterwards with anybody that has a specific question so that you can get what you need out the session. So we're talking about the power of emotional intelligence, and I think it's particularly pertinent in relation to what's going on in the world out there right now. So we're in a very different world, we're in a very different environment. It feels different. We're kind of at home. A lot of us are at home a lot of the time, and our habits and our kind of ways of working have really been challenged and have really been changed. So it's now more pertinent than ever that we have that awareness, that emotional intelligence, and also challenge ourselves to make some choices based on where we want to be going, what we want to be doing, and what we want to be thinking about moving forward. Tough times in some cases. So yeah, sometimes we just need to challenge ourselves a little bit more. So I've got a little bit of a slide pack. I'm not going to hit you with masses and masses of slides. We'll just use it as a little bit of a framework to help us steer the discussion as we go through. What we'll explore, hopefully you've all signed up and you've all seen the little overview of the session up front and in advance. We'll talk about what emotional intelligence is. So there's quite a few definitions, there's lots of different visual models out there. If you Google emotional intelligence, you'll get shed loads of stuff that comes up. So we'll signpost you and I'll reference you to one model that I find the most useful and the most easy to understand. You're welcome to go away and do a little bit more digging of other models and other concepts and other writings around it if you'd like to afterwards. We're really thinking about the world being a stage. So a lot of you are probably here from a leadership perspective. A lot of you are probably here from a business perspective, and some of you might be here from a personal perspective as well. So whatever context we're looking at taking this away and applying it in, the world is a stage. So people are looking at you, people are observing what you do, they're making judgments about the behaviours that you exhibit. Rightly or wrongly, the world is a stage. So we've got to try and maximise our impact. We've got to try and influence people for success. We've got to try and create buy-in to those that are working with us or for us. That world is a stage. We've got to make a difference, and emotional intelligence is our opportunity to do that. We'll talk a little bit about our maps of the world. So how we have built our map of the world, how we've created our habits, how our mindset and how our thinking has been developed and created. And then what we'll do towards the end, obviously, I'll challenge you a little bit on maybe some examples of maybe good and not so good emotional intelligence. And hopefully we'll be able to have a little look at some hints and tips as to maybe how you can build your emotional intelligence post-session, so you can start to apply it all in reality. You can see on the right-hand side there some of the benefits: leadership, personal well-being, staff turnover is reduced. We've all heard the phrase, people don't leave businesses, they leave managers. We can up our team performance, we can decrease some stress and some enhanced well-being if we're a bit more emotionally intelligent and we know how to handle situations and respond to situations. And hopefully we can improve some of our decision making as well, either in the moment or a little bit more long-term and a little bit more strategically as well. So I guess to kick off, let's just talk a little bit about what emotional intelligence really is. So we've got the book definition, if you like, in the pink box: the capacity to be aware of, control and express your emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathy. You've got to love a book definition, haven't you? In reality, and I guess in the real world, and thinking about a plain English definition, we're talking about the ability to recognise, understand and manage our own emotions, and also be able to recognise, understand and influence the emotions of other people as well. So that there's some that is us, it's about us, and there is some that is about tapping into and recognising the emotions of others, how others are feeling and the reactions that you're getting from those people. And it's about being aware of those emotions. They drive our behaviour, they have an impact on other people. Sometimes that's positive, thumbs up, fantastic. Sometimes maybe it's not always our intent. Sometimes it's not always a deliberate action on our part, but sometimes our behaviour sometimes has a negative impact on others and how they respond. So emotional intelligence is very much about learning how to manage those emotions, both of our own and also responding appropriately and helping others to manage their emotions as well. Where does it fit? Well, I'm sure we've heard of IQ. Most of us have heard of IQ, so that's our intelligence, and IQ refers to our ability to learn. So if you look at the research and dig into the detail about what IQ is, actually, ability to learn is the same, be it 15 years old or be it 50 years old. It's consistent, it remains stable over our lifetime, and it's really, really difficult and probably less likely to be able to change that. We've then got personality. So personality, those of you that have done activities and done workshops with me before, personality doesn't change. Actually, what we do have the opportunity to do is flex that personality a little bit, but fundamentally who we are is who we are. It's stable over lifetime. We naturally tap into and calculate what works for us. Are we an extrovert or an introvert, or where do we fit on that scale? Is our preference for thinking or feeling, sensing and intuition? All of that stuff builds and creates our personality. That's who we are. We don't want to change that. We don't want to change who we are, because that's where things get a little bit tricky from an authenticity perspective. But where emotional intelligence really helps us, it's in the green circle there, because it's flexible. We're able to change it if we make the choices to think about how we can change it and how it's appropriate to change it. So emotional intelligence in the world of leadership and the world of business is now seen as up there, probably number one competency, number one skill, particularly from a leadership perspective. If we can tap into building our skills and develop our awareness of what emotional intelligence is and build our own levels of emotional intelligence, that's where we can start to see some real success. And there's some great research on emotional intelligence, mainly out of the US, that says actually 90% of top performers in businesses are naturally high or have worked really hard to build their emotional intelligence. And those with higher levels of emotional intelligence can sometimes earn about $29,000 more a year than their colleagues or their peers that maybe aren't quite as high in that level of emotional intelligence. So there's lots of research and lots of stats out there, worth digging into a little bit more detail if you're interested in some of the background. But most importantly, we've got IQ, we've got personality, stable, consistent. Emotional intelligence is where we've really got an opportunity to build, develop and grow our skills for more success. So that's kind of the importance of why we're looking and specifically talking about emotional intelligence. Just to signpost you, some of the slides will have EQ in brackets. So just like IQ is intelligence quotient, EQ is emotional quotient. So there might be times I refer to EQ, emotional quotient. There might be times when I refer to emotional intelligence. Both are the same things. So over to you guys. Pull up that chat window if you haven't already. And I'm going to ask you to just kind of capture some thinking and capture some thoughts in the chat panel. Thinking about what emotional intelligence or what EQ is, having that ability to respond effectively to people, manage our behaviours, manage how we present ourselves to others. Who are the leaders that you admire or you may have worked for that may demonstrate high levels of emotional intelligence? So I guess in that chat window, I'm interested in, are there any examples of famous leaders that you feel have high emotional intelligence? And I'm also interested in specifically what do they do and how do they do it? So in that chat window, have a little reflect for a couple of seconds and see what you can capture for me. Hopefully I will be able to see. Just as a little note as well, you should have a little blue box on the chat window. Just make sure that that says all panelists and attendees. That will just make sure that I can see what comes through on the chat window. Yeah, thanks, Susan. We've got Boris there, good old topical figure at the moment. So yeah, you're perceiving him as having high emotional intelligence. Obama as a leader who showed emotional intelligence by making people feel that they counted. Nice example, thanks, Jules. Barack Obama is often somebody that's utilised and is referenced as having high emotional intelligence. Absolutely. Michelle Obama, thanks Lucy. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Can we come up with anyone else? Michelle Obama, yeah, definitely. Okay, so here's a couple of people that I feel, I guess, were quite topical. So we've got good old Barack Obama, good, nice example. And the other person that kind of jumps to mind, particularly with what's going on at the moment, and I'm sure some of you will recognise her, Jacinta Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, is in the news so much based on not only her leadership ability, but her ability to be able to tap into a real mix of audiences, a real mix of different social groups, different ways of working. There was a really nice clip on YouTube of her addressing kind of children about Easter, based on what's going on at the moment. You know, the Easter Bunny is a little bit tied up with other stuff, is in lockdown, maybe can't get around like they used to. So, you know, we're going to have to be a little bit more appreciative that it's difficult for the Easter Bunny, just like it is for the rest of us. So her ability to tap into that specific audience shows real levels of high emotional intelligence that enables people to warm to her, like her, engage with her, and therefore make her far more effective. We've got a couple more examples coming in the chat. Princess Diana is a popular choice. Tony Blair, Nicola Sturgeon, yeah, nice examples. See where we're going. We've got a bit of a political theme going here already. Richard Branson, thanks Sarah. Yeah, all of these people probably quite recognised as being able to tap in and respond to different ways of working, different people. Good stuff. Okay, so your next question and your next thing to think about is, let me click on it, whoops. Of the leaders that you see as maybe less effective or less engaging, what do they do that demonstrates lower levels of emotional intelligence? So again, have a little think. Is there anyone that jumps out? I'm interested in the names, and I'm also maybe interested in why you think they're demonstrating lower levels of emotional intelligence. So I'll give you a couple of seconds and a couple of minutes to see what you can capture. Piers Morgan, thanks Susan. Oh, we've got a flurry of Donald Trump coming in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 examples of Donald Trump there. Yeah, certainly. Oh, yeah, Boris. So something again, a bit dependent on perception here. Boris, same attitude as Trump in some people's opinions. So it's personal, isn't it? We'll explore that a little bit more as well. Robert Mugabe, Noel Gallagher, great example. Thanks, Elaine. Yeah, Noel Gallagher. Brilliant. And a couple of the people that kind of jumped to mind, again, being a little bit topical, Katie Hopkins, so famous for her Twitter rants and famous for saying what she thinks, and maybe not always having that awareness of how other people are going to feel and the impact that it's going to have on others, or maybe she just doesn't care. I don't know with her. But yeah, generally known as maybe not having those high levels of emotional intelligence and getting effective results. Yeah, we've got a couple more. Alan Sugar, Katie Price, nice example coming into play there. And yeah, of course, it wouldn't be something on emotional intelligence and leadership if we didn't talk a little bit about Donald Trump. So low levels of emotional intelligence, thinking about what you're saying, thinking about the messages that you're sending out and responding effectively to messages is where we start to see and perceive those real low levels of emotional intelligence. Rob, you've just thrown in Gordon Ramsay there. Yeah, nice example. Behaviours exhibited and responding to certain behaviours, not always the most effective ways of doing things and working with things. Elaine's thrown in Jeremy Clarkson. Yeah, there's. I'm guessing there's some specific examples in the forefront of people's minds that are maybe coming through from what we hear in the media. So we'll look a little bit more about maybe where we go wrong with emotional intelligence in a little while. But here's a model for you, and I'm not a massive fan of big models and big theories, but I quite like the emotional intelligence model. I quite like this one specifically because I think it's quite easy to understand. So this is in some way based on Dan Goleman's theory of emotional intelligence. So if anyone wants to do some additional digging, some additional Googling, or Amazon shop, which is probably doing really, really well at the moment, or eBay shop that's all doing really well at the moment, there's some really good books by Dan Goleman on emotional intelligence. I would certainly recommend having a good read of them. He didn't originally come up with the concept of emotional intelligence, but he is really genuinely credited for bringing it to life a little bit for people, making it more than just a model, a concept, or a theory, and starting to make it meaningful and useful for people to utilize. So it's in nice colour boxes, so it makes it nice and easy for me to reference you to each box as we go through the slide. So you've got a couple of areas there that, as I said at the start, are about you. So they're about the self. They're about how I feel, how I react, and how I see myself. So that red box there, self-awareness, is the first and probably the most critical and the most important element of emotional intelligence. It's the first domain, as Dan Goleman called it. So self-awareness is the ability to recognise and understand your moods, understand your emotions, and understand what drives you. And the most important bit, or probably the most important bit, is the impact and the effect that those moods, emotions, drives, and behaviours have on other people as well. So number one principle, core principle, foundation domain, self-awareness. Actually, if I can build those levels of self-awareness, I'm far more likely to be building my level of emotional intelligence overall. Then if we go to the right-hand side of that, the social awareness box, the green box, what we're starting to tap into here is that ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people, the behaviours that they exhibit, how they react to my behaviours, and their skill or our skill in treating other people according to their emotional reaction. So empathy is a term that's quite commonly used here. So if you think if you're a leader of a team of people, all of those individuals within that team are going to have different ways of working, different styles, different personalities, different views, different opinions, different values, and different beliefs. It's not until I start to build an awareness of all of those people's different styles, beliefs, values, that actually I can start to make some choices, because that's where the emotional intelligence model really comes into its own. I've got me, I've got my self-awareness, I've got my moods, my emotions, and my drivers, and I'm comparing that to what others see, what others do, how others respond, how others have made up their views on what's right or wrong, good or bad. And then I can use that yellow box, which is self-management, to think, hold on a minute, when I rolled my eyes really overtly and everyone said, don't roll your eyes, actually I need to be aware of my behaviours, my reactions, my responses, and I make a choice as to how I manage them. So the self-management piece is that ability to control or redirect some of those impulses, some of those things that we just react or we just shoot from the hip from a little bit, quick, in the moment, without thinking, that is potentially going to have a positive impact on others, which is fantastic, or potentially could also have a negative impact on others. So if we think about that from an influencing, engagement, and building relationships perspective, sometimes we need to do something differently. Sometimes we can continue to be ourselves. So this is kind of the regulation box and how we manage ourselves a little bit as well. If we go down to the fourth box, the blue box, which is the social skills piece, it's your ability to work, build rapport, find common ground in exactly what it says there, social situations. So I always think about as being, are you the first one on the dance floor, or are you the one to sit at the side? This is your ability to respond to some of those situations that you come across, and how are people going to perceive how you react and how you respond in those situations, and how do you work to build a strong level of rapport, ongoing relationship management with the people that you work with, come across, live with, influence on an ongoing longer term basis. So for those of you that are in customer environments, Your social skills kind of relate to the ability to be able to have those long-held, long-term, effective, strong customer relationships that keep the customer loyal to you. So you're working really, really hard, tapping into all of those other 3 boxes, but the social skills is how you behave and how you interact and build rapport in those situations. So a really nice example of kind of where this model came to the forefront for me a couple of days ago. Obviously, we're all in lockdown, so I was out for my little permitted walk, obviously only 1 hour permitted walk a day. So a couple of days ago, I live on a fairly new build housing estate in Peterborough. I'm in the original bit, and as you can imagine with housing estates, they're growing, they're spreading all the time, and there's some really nice lakes, some new properties and some new woodland areas that I thought I'm gonna go off and I'm gonna have a little explore while I've got the opportunity. Got myself completely lost. Obviously didn't quite know where I was, but I knew roughly the direction I was going in. So I kind of cut through this little cut through where there's some new houses, and somebody leaned out of their window and said, "Excuse me, you've just walked across somebody's private front garden there." So my response was, "I'm really sorry, wasn't aware, don't live in this local area, apologies." This particular gentleman continued to be quite, as I perceived, quite forceful, quite aggressive, was clearly quite annoyed and quite frustrated. I'm probably not the only person to have maybe cut across his front garden, not realising it was his front garden. So where am I in the emotional intelligence model? My self-awareness is kicking in, or hopefully kicking in, thinking, okay, this guy is a little bit annoyed. How am I going to respond to this? My social awareness is also kicking in. Okay, we've got an interaction going here. What's working and what isn't working? Yeah. So I've got a couple of choices here, haven't I, from a self-management perspective. I can either get a little bit shirty and a little bit stroppy and say, look, I've just said, I didn't know, I don't know where I am, I'm really sorry, but what am I meant to do? Or maybe I can go back from a communication perspective and say, as I said, super sorry, I will absolutely know for next time. Appreciate that, must be really frustrating for everyone walking across. I won't tell you which one I did, but you can see a really nice example there of where I have to tap into that self-awareness, that understanding of how I'm going to react in that situation. I'm going to have to manage some of those emotions that may become a little bit more naturally to me based on the social situation and that social awareness that I'm picking up from that other person. So this is where that element of choice really starts to come into play when we start to build and we start to understand the model a little bit. So if you think about it from the perspective of personal development, actually, if we want to progress and we want to develop and we want to develop our careers or build our careers from a personal perspective, this model can really help us from the perspective of being an influencer or influencing others or tapping into mentors that are going to help us to kind of build the connections and build the relationships that we need to. It's really important from a leadership perspective because, as we've said in the previous example, if I have a team of people reporting into me that I'm working with, actually, if I can understand how they react in different situations, how they respond to how I communicate, what really frustrates them about me as an individual, what really gets their goat about what's going on out there in the business, as a leader, I can maybe proactively and strategically help some of my team members to cope, manage and handle some of those tougher situations that I might come across a little bit more effectively. From an influencing perspective, or when I'm working with customers, actually, if I'm trying to build relationships with those people, I'm trying to get people to buy into what I want, what I need, and what needs to happen, I've got to think about the methods in which I communicate that are going to get the best responses. And maybe I've got to tweak my style and manage my emotions and manage that style a little bit more based on what comes back from those other people as well. Building relationships generally, selling. If I want to build more effective sales, increasing my sales, I've got to make people feel like I'm involving them, I'm on the same page of them. I've got to use that social awareness to get a sense of where they're at, and I've got to manage how I behave and manage how I react to some of the things that they say based on what's coming back. Also, if you think about the world right now, at the moment, we'll look at a couple more examples in a second, but we're doing stuff differently. We're having to work really differently. We're kind of going through that change curve, all of us individually. Actually, we've all just got to recognise in ourselves, it's okay to have some of those peaks and troughs. It's really easy to be difficult, to be hard on ourselves, to kind of be self-frustrated. Actually, I've spent 2 hours watching Netflix instead of doing some strategic added value work on my laptop. Sometimes that's okay from a well-being perspective, as long as we have that awareness and we're able to make some of those choices to self-manage as well. So it really genuinely is about recognizing we have a choice. Okay. So let me just check in on the Q&A. So we don't have any Q&A, so I think people are generally using the chat, which is great. Let's just have a little check back in. We've got Jules, yeah, thanks, really nice example. Mike Ashley, I'm assuming that's somebody that is probably a little bit lower in emotional intelligence, based on some of the responses and some of the reactions and some of the communications that we saw from him, particularly in light of recent situations as well. So yeah, another really nice example. So probably somebody who is maybe a little bit lacking in that self-awareness, isn't maybe as comfortable or isn't quite as aware of the impact on others that what they say, do, or how their behaviour is having on others, and perhaps a little bit less likely to self-manage as well. So yeah, certainly a negative example there. So where does our natural level of, I guess, ways of working and ways of thinking come from? So this slide looks quite complex. It isn't complex, but it's a nice little visual way of kind of, I guess, signposting what feels comfortable and what feels natural to us. So we all witness the same events. We all kind of have the truth that is presented to us. Where we have a little bit of a challenge sometimes, or sometimes we have a positive reaction, is when we start to put our unique filters and we pick and choose the bits of that data that we're presented with based on our own map of the world. So we've all got different beliefs, we all have different values, some of us are creative in our thinking, some of us are a little bit more logical. Some of the experiences that we've had as we've grown up, so we've had role models, we've had parents, maybe we've been brought up by different people, maybe we've had different job roles where we've learned different things and different scenarios that we've been in. Some of us have had some real challenging experiences and some real challenging times in our lives. All of that builds our unique filters. We're still faced with the same data and the same information, but our perception or our truth shifts or develops or builds based on those filters that we put behind things. So as a bit of an example, actually, I can remember being brought up when I was living at home with mum and dad, fairly traditional environment. Dad would go out to work. Dad would earn the money, mum would be at home, part-time job, but always responsible for doing the dinner at the end of the day for dad to come home. So what I've seen, or what I saw as I grew up, was, I guess, the more traditional roles of a mum and a dad figure. So actually, because that's all I've seen, that's put, or that's created, or started to create, an element of my map of the world. So I see that as being completely normal, completely average, nothing else, nobody else would do anything different. That's the reality of what happens. I story tell, I put a bit of meaning behind it. So actually that's my personal story. I can remember mum being in the kitchen and getting a little bit of a frown or a disapproving comment if dad walked in and dinner wasn't ready. I'm putting that story behind it because it's what I've experienced. I'm attaching my emotions and my feelings. So it's driving some energy behind that. And actually, what's that going to do in turn? That could drive my behaviours. So, you know, if I went into an environment where dad's cooking and mum's out working full time, oh, that feels odd. That feels a bit strange. Surely that isn't normal. It's not because it's wrong. It's just because I've got a very different map of the world and I've had very different experiences. What then happens is, until I become aware of that as being part of my map of the world, and there could be a choice out there that somebody's doing something a little bit differently, I start to achieve. So I start to look for things that justify my normal. So I lose that element of choice a little bit, and I just program myself to create habits, create a mindset, create routines that fit what I see as being normal, relevant, and average to me. So sometimes this is where those mindsets that we all have, if we don't have the levels of emotional intelligence to challenge ourselves and challenge that self-awareness and challenge those self-beliefs, where I might start to come across some challenges and some, I guess, some tricky situations going forwards, because people who have got very different maps of the world, there's the potential for that little bit of a clash sometimes as we move forward into the future as well. Yeah. So maps of the world, so important to have an awareness of. So I'm really hoping this one's spinning. It's spinning on my screen. So hopefully she's spinning on your screen as well. So have a little look at this spinning lady. And I guess I'm interested in who can see her spinning clockwise and who can see her spinning anti-clockwise. So I'll give you a minute just to kind of create an expectation or create a norm for which way you see her. So Fiona's got anti-clockwise, Caroline's clockwise, Eleanor's clockwise. Okay, quite a few for clockwise. Oh, we've got somebody who can see us spinning both. A couple of people who can see us spinning both. Clockwise at first, but then both. So we've got a real mix there. We've got a real mix of responses coming in. So for those of you who can see us spinning one way, focus on it. Tell yourself you can potentially see a little bit more there, because other people have got a different map of the world, so can see it slightly differently. Really try hard to make her change direction. Oh, Diane's got both. Lucy can now see both. Fantastic. Valeria can see both now too. And I'm happy to send this out so you can save it as your desktop if you just want to sit and look at it for a while. No, I won't do that. Stacey can see both now too. Emma's feeling a little bit dizzy because it keeps changing, it keeps flicking backwards and forwards. So I personally love this slide, because for me, this kind of describes maps of the world and how we go through life just based on what we're seeing in front of us. So actually my view is that person is spinning clockwise. Let's make a decision based on what we see. Actually, it's not until we start to challenge that perception, challenge our own map of the world, that maybe we can look a little bit deeper and think, hold on a minute here. Other people might see something very, very different. This could be missing a great opportunity to engage more people, self-regulate, and recognize when maybe we could be doing something different. Yeah. Also, we've got some tips coming in here. Yeah. Some people say, Valeria is saying, Claire, focus on her head. You'll start seeing moving anti-clockwise. Good little tip. And some people say to me, if you focus on the tips of the fingers of her outstretched hand and really concentrate, you can make her flip direction. Some people say, I just need to look away for a minute and then look back. And I can absolutely, oh, Claire's got it. Fantastic. Well done, Claire. Jo can still only see clockwise. So you kind of see where we're going with this. Actually, if I tell you and we talk about it enough, more and more people start to see the choices and the options that they might be presented with to kind of be able to move forward. So there is a question in the Q&A, so I'll give you another minute on that one. So we've got a good question here. So why is it that some leaders with little or no emotional intelligence are still successful? Well, interesting question, isn't it? And actually, some of the businesses and some of the organizations that I work with, I see a lot of leaders with low emotional intelligence. And being really honest, sometimes they create that environment of people not wanting to challenge them. So maybe it drives that culture of fear a little bit. And also, businesses and individuals actually are genuinely sometimes quite slow to respond to it, to offer feedback, to offer levels of performance management that help people to become more aware. And I also think there's a big element there of certainly training for organisations and for businesses. A lot of people have never come across the term emotional intelligence, have never done anything to build those levels of self-awareness. So sometimes it's from the perspective of it's positive intent, and we'll look at an example of that in a second. Sometimes it just doesn't always come across in the way. So yes, certainly there are successful leaders out there that do remain successful even though they have low levels of emotional intelligence. Sometimes they just tap into a big part of the audience that has the same map or similar map of the world to them, so they get that connection and they get that relationship going. Fab. So like I say, I'm happy to send that out as your desktop, so you can look at it day in, day out, and you can proactively make a shift and make a change direction. But remember, this is about choice. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about choice, and I've already used the term a couple of times. Usually, in a world of choices, I choose me. Because what I do and how I think and how I behave feels the most natural, it comes the most comfortably, and actually I've programmed myself so much to think in the way that I think and behave in the way that I behave, I forget that I do have that choice. Yeah. So being emotionally intelligent means that we don't just act and react based on those habits. It means we stop and we recognise our ability to make some of those choices about how we behave moving forward. So Gerard, we've got, I think many organisational leaders are rewarded for not showing empathy or leading with emotional intelligence. So yeah, absolutely. And when you think about organisational cultures, we certainly still have, and I work hard with quite a few businesses to try and move away from, I guess, what is that older school command and control culture, which is probably about the task, just getting people to do something. I've just got to manage people to get the job done, to get the widgets out the door at the end of the day. Actually, we need to make that shift. We need to move a little bit towards recognizing that engaging cultures that have emotionally intelligent leaders, make people feel better, people feel more engaged. Engagement links to performance. If we can create that different environment and maybe challenge some of those cultures, usually that's where we start to become a little bit more effective. Yeah. Okay, so we've said we've got choices, how we behave and how we react, and I'm seeing quite a few of these little quotes and these little boxes, certainly during the time that we're in at the moment. And fortunately, I'm now also starting to see some people edit and kind of change some of these and challenge them a little bit, which I think is fantastic. So I'm seeing this a lot. If you don't come out of this quarantine with a new skill, a new side hustle, new knowledge, you never lacked time, you lacked discipline. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what others think about that. And I don't know if others have seen that, or, maybe some of you have posted it yourselves. I don't know. But for me, this is kind of really challenging that emotional intelligence. So number one for me, probably somebody is posting that because they want to drive somebody forward. They want somebody to develop a new skill. They want people to take the opportunity and create a new business or a side hustle. They want people to build new knowledge. So it's meant in a positive way. It's meant with positive intent. And that's one of the things that I always challenge myself on. Assume positive intent from other people. Very, very rarely are people doing things deliberately to cause conflict or challenge. It's just because they've got a different map of the world. But from an emotional intelligence perspective, I've also got a little bit of a choice, if I think about it, to say, hold on a minute, what about the people that are looking after 3 children, all running around a 2-bedroom house? I'm still trying to work. I've got my laptop at my dining table. Do you know what? Having read that, you're telling me I lack discipline. Actually, what impact is that having on me, my emotions and my reactions? So for some people that are posting that stuff positively with positive intent, showing maybe lower levels of emotional intelligence because they're not tapping into and reacting maybe to how some people might perceive that. Our other challenge is for me as an individual, if I'm emotionally intelligent, to say, well, that's really interesting. Somebody's clearly written that. They haven't got 3 children running around their house. So do you know what? I'm just going to put that to one side. I'm not going to think about that too much. I'm not going to stress too much about that, because actually that doesn't feel right and that doesn't feel comfortable to me. So it doesn't quite fit. I'm going to move on. Yeah. So we post stuff and we see stuff and we take things from it. Also, we've got to think about actually what are we doing and how are we behaving that maybe we perceive to be positive intent, but that others could potentially perceive as maybe being a little bit more negative as well. Yet more senior people need to go on emotional intelligence courses to grasp the concept. I absolutely agree. I feel like I work hard to show emotional intelligence when managing people through change, but often find that they don't see it from my point of view. Yeah, good shout, Catherine. So does that show my lack of emotional intelligence skill with theirs? That could be where there's a little bit of self-awareness work to do. So actually, from an emotional intelligence perspective, it's that two-way street a little bit. So maybe if kind of you're seeing yourself as maybe doing the positive stuff and with positive intent, that could be where you need to have or could benefit from a little bit of a conversation to say, hold on a minute, I'm doing this with positive intent, give me some feedback, what's working, what isn't. That might help you to continually develop those emotional intelligence skills. So that's a good shout there. Okay, so another example then, and this one is pretty topical. Priti Patel. Priti's been cleared. Investigation finds no evidence of allegations that the Home Secretary bullied staff. So I think this is a really interesting one, because a lot of the time we kind of throw some words around like bullying or people feel bullied, and to individuals, if that's how they feel, that is their reality based on their map of the world. So we've kind of got to take that into account. Actually, this for me is a really nice example where we get some leaders that are really high in emotional intelligence and are really able to flex and adapt and give individuals what they need. I think this accusation comes from an individual that is probably used to a very different style of leader, very different leader before Priti Patel. So maybe there was bullying here. I don't know. I can't comment on the detail of the case. Maybe there wasn't bullying, but what we did get is almost that lack of emotional intelligence on the part of a leader here that has had a really detrimental impact on how somebody feels or how somebody is responding. Yeah. So the point where we get to allegations of bullying is almost the point that we've gone too far. If we can demonstrate some emotional intelligence as a leader, we can gain some of that feedback, we can have honest and open conversations. That's where we can start to build those relationships more strategically, and maybe we start to avoid some of the situations where, based on maps of the world, different working styles, different ways of thinking, there could potentially be that real clash. And if there's too much of a clash, we get stuff like this happen, whether there's bullying or whether there isn't, whether it's positive intent or non-positive intent, we get that conflict against what we're all seeing and what we're all experiencing and what we're all hearing as well. So we do have a choice. There's some examples here that actually sometimes we may never have thought of what we're posting on Facebook or what we put on Facebook. Actually, if we want to build that level of emotional intelligence before we hit that post button, it's about recognizing, I just need to stop. I just need to think about how I'm perceiving this and my intent here. And I just need to think maybe about how others might perceive this, the impact and the effect it might have, because remember, how we behave has an impact on maybe what other people feel. So yeah, two I guess quite topical examples. Think about your own levels of emotional intelligence and some of the perceptions that you build from these two, and also think about actually if we're the person that is doing the posting and communicating it out proactively, we may just need to stop and just think about how this is going to come across to other people as well. So it is about challenging yourselves, and there's a few little quotes on here. There's a few little thinking pieces on here, and these are kind of captured from things that I've maybe heard or that I've experienced myself. So you know, when you go into a restaurant and you love the waiter or you love the person that's serving, but your friend says, "Oh, I don't like them. It's not genuine. It's over the top. It's too much. Can't handle with that level of interaction. It's unnecessary. It's inappropriate." Different maps of the world, different perceptions, different views. Actually, if we can be emotionally intelligent, it's not that I didn't like him. It's just actually he has a very different style to me, and I have to be aware of that. And I have to think about the words that I use when I deliver feedback or I communicate to somebody else about the situation. That's really made me angry. Well, you choose your emotional response to situations. So being emotionally intelligent means you're able to recognize when you're feeling angry and almost give yourself that little pep talk and that little bit of self-talk. So hold on a minute, in the grand scheme of things, how important is this based on what's going on at the moment? Is this emotion justified? And I actually have a choice as to how I move forward from this. Why are you speaking to me like I'm a child? Well, maybe the other person doesn't necessarily mean to communicate to you like you're a child. Maybe it's just what they're more comfortable with and familiar with based on their upbringing. It's how they've got results in the past. Maybe we need to offer some feedback or encourage some conversation around that. I don't understand why you can't just shut your child in their bedroom to dial into this Zoom call. It's really, really important. Do you know what? Think about the impact that could have on someone else in a very different situation, with very different values, with very different beliefs to you. Communicating in that way and talking to people in that way, even if sometimes it's just meant light-hearted or it's, you know, joking, sometimes what we say and what we do and how we behave has an impact that we don't always intend. Really popular one, maybe I shouldn't have posted that on Facebook with hindsight. Like I say, we click the post button, we don't always think about maybe how other people are going to interpret it, how other people are going to perceive it. Actually, we have a choice. We can still post it if we want to and we feel it's appropriate, but then we have to potentially respond and react to the responses that we get. We've got a little question coming on the chat. Does someone's cultural background also come into the way that they manage others? Absolutely, and I've kind of experienced this quite a lot. There are certain cultures, and when you think about the world as it is at the moment, we are so culturally diverse. Actually, it's kind of, in some cases, become a little bit of a melting pot. So what some people perceive as being normal to them actually are very different when they apply those behaviours, and they get very different reactions when they exhibit those behaviours in different environments. So yeah, kind of we always joke and we always kind of laugh about, you know, the prim and proper Brits. Actually, sometimes there's a bit of an element of challenge, and maybe we talk about someone who is a little bit more enthusiastic, a little bit more vibrant. Oh, they're too much, they're over the top. That's just a different map of the world. It's different cultures that have created our maps of the world. We have to be tolerant of maybe what other people do, how they react and how they behave. Encourage some discussion, encourage some conversations, and just maybe appreciate and be a little bit more tolerant that some of us are coming from different places, either emotionally or physically as well. So yeah, really good question there. I love these two, and I heard this quite recently, or I saw this quite recently, again on social media. I hate vegans, I love meat. Actually, it sounds quite lighthearted, and it sounds quite funny, and it was probably posted in jest, not particularly seriously. But actually, if you're a vegan, how does it feel to see the word hate written on a post, on Facebook, on social media, or whatever? Somebody has posted in jest, hasn't necessarily thought about the serious implications that it could have on somebody, it could impact on them, it could affect how they feel about themselves and the way that they think and the way that they work. Now you're working from home all the time, I bet you're dossing all day in your pyjamas. Again, possibly said in jest, but actually makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable based on the current situation. If I'm not out of my pyjamas by 8:30 and at my laptop, kind of lesser person or lesser figure based on that throwaway comment that you've just made to me. So it's challenging ourselves every time we react to something. It's challenging ourselves when we start to communicate with other people in the ways that we become comfortable and familiar. Just recognise that sometimes it doesn't always come across in the way that it's intended. You have a choice, yeah? If something comes back negative and it wasn't your intent, you've also got to be emotionally intelligent enough to recognise, really sorry, that wasn't how it was intended, almost responding and reacting in a way that is appropriate and emotionally intelligent, rather than just saying, well, that's my view, if you don't like it, tough. Yeah. So it's that level of emotional intelligence that we're trying to demonstrate. It's also about body language as well. So actually, I mentioned at the start, you know, we see people roll their eyes, or, you know, we see people that are sat in meetings and are clearly not interested. Actually, what that's showing is, it could be that they don't really care, but it could also be that there is a real lack of emotional intelligence there as well. So, you know, there's the classic, isn't it? Oh, you're folding your arms. Well, my perception is that you're not interested. Well, it might just be a little bit more comfortable to sit with my arms folded. But until I've got that feedback from somebody, until you've told me and shared with me maybe how you perceive it, how other people might be perceiving it, I don't put two and two together that me folding my arms could be perceived as the fact that I'm not interested. That's where the importance of the conversation comes into play, and the importance of that two-way communication piece to make sure people are on the same page and are getting it, and have the option to build their own levels of emotional intelligence themselves too. So coming to the end now, so kind of thinking about some top tips and thinking about some stuff to focus on and think about as we move forward. So how do you manage your emotional intelligence? Well, it's normal. You are normal. I can assure you, you are normal as far as normal exists these days. You're normal based on your map of the world. So some things in your map of the world, thumbs up, fantastic, it works and it fits and it gets you the results that you need. But remember, you've also got that choice if you want to, and you might need to flex and adapt and respond a little bit to other people's normal or someone else's normal, because it may have a more positive effect. And I always say at this point, it's not about changing who you are, because remember that personality piece at the start, we're always going to perform at our best when we can be ourselves. Actually, the opportunity comes when we say, I'm still going to be myself, but I'm also happy to flex and adapt and recognise when maybe a different approach or something that I think about differently might help me to get better results and better outcomes moving forward. Build your awareness of why you might feel or react the way that you do. So I think I said it earlier on, sometimes we just need to stop when we recognise we're feeling angry or frustrated or upset or tired. Sometimes we just need to challenge ourselves, think, why do I feel this way? What is it in my map of the world that has made me feel this emotion in this situation? Because sometimes when we look for that evidence, we can either justify it or we can start to make more choices about how we can maybe scribble it down and move away from it, move forward, develop ourselves, explore more, research more, whatever, to help us to move forward on what we do. Really consider how your actions affect other people. So this is about you, but it's also about other people. It's the impact felt versus the impact intended. You've got to prompt some discussion. As with all of this stuff, you've got to ask for feedback, because it's that feedback that is going to build that self-awareness. The bigger that self-awareness box becomes, and the more it swells, and the more self-aware we become, the more effective we become at making some of those choices. Stop, reflect, and be mindful, and do the positive stuff that builds your energy and rebuilds your energy as well. So it's about that recharge as well. So I'm kind of happy to send this slide pack out, and I'm sure the guys at the One Group will send it out as well. There's some really good reflection questions, and I'm not kind of suggesting that any of you start the reflection piece now. It is really genuinely worth kind of shutting yourself away in a quiet room for a period of time and maybe having a little think and a little reflect about some of these. Who inspires you? Why? What makes you angry? How do you have fun? How do you deal with a bad day? And the important bit about some of these questions and some of these things to think about is that you really challenge yourself maybe on why. Start to build that understanding of your map of the world. and maybe also start to challenge it a little bit if you feel it's appropriate to challenge it as well. Maybe think about some of those people that you naturally have conflict with, or you don't quite gel as much, or you don't get on with quite as well. Do you know what? Think about emotional intelligence and how that can help. What conversations can you start with them? How can you start to build that relationship a little bit more, build their self-awareness, build your own self-awareness, and hopefully try and meet in the middle a little bit for better results and for better results. Yeah, Gerard, we've got conversations, two-way communication, being authentic, absolutely, building trust, and also being vulnerable as well. So being genuine and being real and authentic. And there's a couple of questions from those of you that are here from a leadership perspective as well. What have your biggest challenges been as leaders recently? How did you feel in those situations? And then maybe challenge yourself. How are you going to move forward from them? So 10 emotional intelligence reflection questions. Happy to send out the slides so you can maybe spend a little bit of time thinking about emotional intelligence more widely. So coming to the end, so I'll hand over to Mark in a second just to kind of give the final wrap up. But what have we explored in an hour? We've done pretty well to get to where we've got to from an emotional intelligence perspective. Massive topic, really broad topic, and I'd certainly suggest and recommend digging into a little bit more detail if you're interested. Happy to have some conversations individually with people if you're interested in hearing more afterwards. We've looked really at what emotional intelligence is. We've considered that everything we do is on show. The world is a stage, but we have choices. We can be seen as positive, or maybe if we don't make those choices that are as positive as we intend them to be, sometimes people might see us as maybe not in the way that we want to. Hopefully we've explored our maps of the world. So my challenge to you guys is maybe go away and think about your own maps of the world. When do you need to challenge it? When are they really giving you the outcomes and the results that are positive and are good? And hopefully I've given you a couple of little tips to challenge yourselves on how to build your own emotional intelligence as well. So hopefully you're taking something away. Feel free to touch base, find me on LinkedIn, connect via the One Group email that's going to come out on the back of this session. But thank you very much for attending. I've really enjoyed delivering it in this new world, in this new way of working. So feel free to get in touch if you'd like to explore or talk about anything in more detail. So Mark, over to you. Final sum up and final close of the session.
There we go. You can hear me now.
You're on.
Very good, cool. Yeah, I couldn't for whatever reason unmute myself, but no, I just wanted to thank everybody and thank you, Sean, for that. Really good, and gave us a good opportunity to kind of sort of step back now and have a look at ourselves as leaders, as people, and how we can actually get more out of understanding our own traits before trying to influence others. And again, I kind of delayed putting my video on because you can probably tell out of me and Sean which one of us lives with a hairdresser, and that isn't me. My hair's starting to get wildly out of control. I also like the global filter today, so amazed that we've managed to get reach globally to Australia at Melbourne, so really pleased with that. And the map of the world, it means even more fitting that I decided to move my office location to the map behind me today. So yeah, it all seems to be very natural now. The EQ for me, so I guess it's a really good opportunity for leaders to reach out to their business and to the people working within it, because you know, some of the answers about how we're going to get out the back end of this isn't going to come from us, it's going to come from our teams. They're much closer to the ground and have their opinions. So I think we really should be asking lots of questions of our teams and engagement in order for us to demonstrate some great emotional intelligence right now. I actually like the quote that you mentioned earlier. If you don't come out of quarantine with a new skill, you lack discipline. This does ring true. My office today is my kitchen. I'm closer to my fridge, and that is my definite lack of discipline in this environment. A few people have been asking about the slides. We will be sending them out. So a feedback email is going to come across after this webinar is closed in a second. We have another webinar which is happening next Wednesday, and this is around this is a follow-up to our original one around furlough. So There are still some unanswered questions there around furlough, which has now been extended to the end of June. So I know a lot of businesses have now put this in place, us being one of them as well. So, but then there's also the impact of what this looks like coming out of furlough. So, you know, it's a brilliant scheme that the government have put in place, and it's enabled businesses to kind of take a bit of a sigh of relief. But actually, you know, there's going to be some real thought that needs to be made now coming out the back end of this and when furlough finishes. So this is what the topic of debate is going to be with Mills and Reeve next Wednesday. And we will send out the link to that as well. We'll then be having probably a couple of week break, I think, on the webinars. So we want to know what you want to hear about. So on the feedback, please come back to us. Let us know what else is important, what else you want to be hearing about in this marketplace that's going to help you. And we will then tailor our content accordingly. And yeah, Sean and I will stay on the call now. So that's the end of the content. So we'll just stay on while everybody else sort of filters off. If people do have some questions, either from a recruitment point of view, yeah, by all means, please feel free. Or if you want to direct some calls some questions over to Sean, we'll just stay on this call for a moment or two. But yeah, thank you everybody for attending today. It's really good comments coming through. Yeah, stay safe. And yeah, I wish you all the very best. And I'll see you all again soon. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Sean.